Hello, this is Cheryl Bullock, and I'm your doctoral committee chair. I gave you a little video about how to create a code book and go from code to themes to presentation of your research within your results. And I really I re-looked at it, and I'm going to delete it because it was very confusing, and I want to do it again. All right, so let's say that you have, a qualitative study, and you have 12 interviews, at least 50, and you have, say, 12 interviews. So now you've transcribed those interviews, and now you're looking at a lot of paper for all of these interviews. So what do you want to do to start this process of analyzing all this qualitative data? Well, you start with a code book. And so what does that mean? This is an extensive job, by the way. This is not something you're going to be able to do in an hour. This takes a long time. You start with interview transcript 1, and you start reading and you look for codes. And the codes are just going to be things that relate to your research question. And you have to have at least 50, so you're going to see there'll be a lot. So maybe you're reading the first one, and the very first interview it says, there's, staff training. I wish that my staff would take more training. You're interviewing principals. So you put staff training and then a definition of your code. Now this is where I just talked with a graduate student who just finished doing this, and she told me that she's going to put the actual quote there. And I like that idea because, you're keeping the data as raw as you can by saying, all right, I said staff training is a code. Here's the full sentence I pulled that from about staff training. And you're going to go through and you're going to have, at minimum, by the time you finish with that 12th interview transcript, 96. I don't know why I said 96. At minimum 50, but you might have up to 90. There's a lot of codes. It's your first step. Think of it as culling the data for the first time to try to get it into a way, a schematic, a strategy, a format, whatever you want to call it. You're getting it into a way that you can turn all of this information into themes. And then you can articulately talk about those themes when discussing your research question findings. So, no, I want you to read about this. This is not, I don't want you to say, Dr. Bullock showed me exactly how to do this. I did show you the one I like, and that's fine. You use it. But please don't go into this blindly. Understand that a lot of people have written things about how to organize a code book. I'm telling you, personal preference, but I'd also like you to really understand the purpose and function of a code book. It's your first place to start pulling this data from all these transcripts together. The next step is themes. And so this code book, A, I want you to read about it. I want you to be able to speak from the literature about it. C, I want you to understand this is an intensive process. It's not something you're going to do in one night. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about are the themes. All right, so there are two ways themes can be used in qualitative data. One is emergent, which is what we're doing. Some people call this axle coding, but axle coding is really more this. Axle coding is what you start with. And then you move to thematic analysis. So what does that mean? All right, so I had 90 codes up here. Now, as I've got all my beautifully, maybe I color coded each code, or maybe I copied it, but somehow I can now afresh look at the codes and start seeing if they begin to clump. So staff training up here, 1, well, let's say 50 or 42, code 42 was professional development. Well, now I say, oh, you know what? Okay, so I see a theme here that's developing, and this theme is, and I've read through all the transcripts one more time, and I've gone through and I've said, okay, da, da. This theme is about staff training. So it has code 1 and 42, and probably some others as you go through and analyze it, and we call it whatever you decide. And what I'm trying to tell you is this is not an exercise that I can teach you and you can walk out and do. But when you're reading about these things and when you're in the literature, I want to give you a concrete example of what they're talking about. So essentially, the thematic analysis, and again, I also gave each one doing a qualitative study, I gave you a copy of a great article by Barnes, and I'm not sure, but it's thematic analysis, and I put it in your classroom if you are doing qualitative. All right, so you go through the next process, which is to start to combine these codes and to give them a name that's going to become one of your themes. So you'll have probably 5 to 8 themes that will come out, but this is a thematic analysis table. So when you're reading about thematic analysis and they talk about these tables, understand that's what they're talking about. All right, so the next step is a thematic analysis table by research question, right? So you're doing the same thing, but now you're calling it even one more step. You're saying, okay, this theme I called, theme. I don't know. But it really didn't answer research question 1. That's okay. But it answered research question 2, so I'm not going to worry about it. But this one that had codes 2, 6, 9, 57, and I call it whatever it is, it did help me answer research question 1. So I'm going to put the numbers here, the name of the theme, at least one example, and the number of times that each participant mentioned this code. And then you do the same thing for the next research question. So again, these are complicated issues. This is not something that I can give you a worksheet and you can do, but as you're reading through them, I wanted you to have at least some idea of how this plays out. Thanks.